sure that we've had a lot of people that live here, but I don't know if they've told them. You know, that comes sign later.
You what?
Just went without.
But is it
All
all the resolutions that we've passed on? Hopefully not included.
Well, and maybe because, well,
They
or we could just
they
send it
are
on
not
Friday.
Yeah, usually.
So if I go, if I meet you on Friday, will you do morning?
Yeah. If you want to text me, I'll let you know time. Usually I try to get over there, whenever you put it on your side, you see the kids kind of help us set too, and so. I usually get back on Thursday and stuff on Friday, so.
Okay.
Usually only 9, right? Get started.
Cause you know, is it?
Is this the first one?
Kind of.
We have some tweaking to do.
Okay, yeah. Like the looking up through the agenda video.
Be a good time.
Okay, you guys, I guess we'll go ahead and begin the meeting. I'm subbing in tonight for Scott, so we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Okay, what now?
Need to move.
Oh, yes, vote on the agenda?
Yep.
Oh, I thought we had a motion and a second. Oh,
We
okay,
did,
so
yeah, you
now
have
we
to vote.
Sorry,
Yep.
guys.
You're good.
Okay, so those who, oh gosh, hold on a second. Okay, those in favor of adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, and then we approve the consent agenda? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Is there a motion?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Okay. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda? Okay, can I get a motion?
Just Board of Education. You know, it's-
Okay, are there any Board of Education acknowledgements?
I would just share that not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, July 20th, is the SOS Serving Our Students event. So the registration's open, it's on Facebook. Thank you to all you that have shared it. So really just a reminder to get the word out for people to sign up. Anybody that needs help, it's anybody that lives in USD368, that's our students. That's the only criteria qualifying. So just show up, sign up. By pre-registering, it saves them time when they check in, it's gonna give us their name and go on in. So as of today, we have over 160 people already registered.
That's awesome.
Usually we get close to 200 between the day of and between now and then, so we want to help as many people as we can. And then also, anybody that wants to volunteer and come see it, a lot of people come back every year, so. It's always the third Saturday of July. I meant to hand out the red pens again this year. I will get those out for the next, oh, Kelly's got hers. We made up pens. Someday we're gonna make t-shirts and billboards that say third Saturday in July, because you never have to wonder when it is. For
Right.
participants or volunteers, it's always the third Saturday. Would have been the fourth Saturday, but that's the fair week here, so that's how we ended up on the third Saturday. So, all are welcome. Please share and tell your friends and neighbors that need help.
Okay, very good, thank you, Janine.
No, I don't have anything. I'll talk about what's going on with me here later.
Just a quick update from what I shared in my board report, dealing with the Fair Labor Standards Act and the increase in salary test for the exemption. Jenny and I have been watching that, and we were expecting someone to file suit against Department of Labor. And so We did get to July 1st, and it did go into effect for everyone except for the state of Texas as an employer. The state of Texas did file suit against Department of Labor and did win a stay from the implementation of that, but all other employers in the United States who are under the Fair Labor Standards Act now have those new thresholds for salary tests. The only part of our employee population that got caught in that were parents as teacher educators. But the plan is for every 3 years for the Department of Labor to inflate those salary numbers again. And so the next groups that possibly could fall under that into the future would be social workers, and then physical therapists and occupational therapists. Those are the next three we'll be watching to see. Right now, they're all above that salary threshold. But if their wages do not inflate faster than what Department of Labor would inflate, then possibly be doing something similar in the future. Don't think it's going to cause an issue with parents as teachers because they have a flexible schedule already, because the majority of them are not full-time employees working 40 hours a week. So the odds of them hitting overtime are not very high. Just something to keep on the radar.
I would just mention and thank Tom Falsgraf for the work he's done for the streaming and so forth. So we are streaming on our first meeting tonight. There are some bugs I'm sure we're gonna have to work out and try to tweak some things as we go, but appreciate all the work him and his staff have done.
Okay, wonderful. So next, are we on reorganization? So next is reorganization of the board. We need to elect a new board president.
Nominate Christian Gherkin. Need a second.
Second.
I would like to nominate Michelle Leto.
I'll second that.
You should ask if there's any other nominations.
I was just giving people the time to think about.
And then if not, we should just vote.
Okay, well, and I saw the folder, I just didn't know what, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other nominations for board president?
Okay.
You can vote for Christian and then for
And we just did the hand raise vote?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so, we'll vote on Christian first. Those in favor of Christian as our next board president, please raise your hand.
Okay.
Okay,
Michelle.
and then those voting for Michelle for the next board president, please raise your hand.
Rock, scissors.
Okay, so what do we do at this point?
You don't have a majority vote, so you're gonna have to, I would say, discuss it between, amongst yourselves.
It's usually a coin tosses when it comes to elections, which is crazy, but, cause they're
Because we
happening.
don't have a vote,
Right,
so.
oh gosh, okay. So,
And I don't have a coin.
I
do
don't.
we wanna do discussion, do we?
Well, I mean, how?
Would you
how-
guys prefer one of you to be VP and one to be president? Save us another vote?
Yeah, right.
Can they work it out that way, if they agree to do it?
I mean, it's up to you guys. I mean, if you vote, I mean,
I mean, I would-
coin or.
I wouldn't mind being VP to learn, I would love that, but it's, I mean,
Okay, so then I move that we make Michelle the board president and Christian the vice president. So then you can learn.
Okay, so there has been a motion
I would second that.
and a second.
Mhm.
Okay, so now let's vote vote on Michelle being president and Christian being vice president. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
And then opposed.
I'll go in favor.
Oh, you're in favor too? Okay.
Took me a second.
No, that's okay. Okay,
6-0.
6-0.
Okay, wonderful. Well, there we go. That was fun and interesting. Okay, so now I guess I get,
Now you can skip to 3.
do the rest of this. Okay.
Yep.
So next we need to, approve clerk, Jimmy Hay, deputy clerk, Laura Lee Crum, and treasurer, Jenny Myers. Can I get a motion to approve those positions?
So moved. Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Can we vote on approving clerk Jimmy Hay, deputy clerk Laura Lee Crum, and treasurer Jenny Myers? 6-0.
Yep.
Okay, next G.
Yep.
Okay, next we have online enrollment, open July 8th through the 28th with Tammy.
Yes, so, online enrollment opened this morning, and, it's going, every time we open enrollment, there's always just a little hitch, and we've gotten, through that. I think it's going fine. We've had over, when I left, today, 134 people had already enrolled, and over 140 had started enrollment, so it's going fine. We have a lot of people that come in, need some help, so that's always good to do. So lots of phone calls, and we just keep on going. Jim Prothy comes in and he makes sure everything's going as well. So I want to, put a shout out to him, because without him fixing some things, we wouldn't be able to get it done. So
Very good. Very good. Okay, preliminary budget presentation with Jimmy.
Okay, well. So I should have probably started with the definition of preliminary. It does not mean short, by the way. Never is, right? But anyway, it is July, so it's budget time. So I have a lot of slides, we'll walk through it. The board members feel free to ask the questions during interrupt, because it may be more timely on that slide, but we can always come back later at the end. I'll ask dig in for questions at the end. So we'll just jump right in and get started. So first, just kind of to walk through, because what we're doing tonight is approving the preliminary mill levy rates and whether or not we're exceeding revenue neutral or not. So this is kind of just a little bit of a history lesson, and a lot of these slides are what I have in here every year, but I think it's a good reminder and a good refresher. So a couple of years back in the 2021 legislative session, that's when the new publication requirements and the new Revenue Neutral Transparency Act, whatever you want to call it, came into play, which required different things than boards have done in the past. So requiring a resolution be passed if you're going to exceed the revenue neutral tax rate to finance the budget for the coming year. These are just some excerpts. This is not the whole statute, but it's some key points. And the yellow highlights are kind of my focus areas of basically what each one's talking about. So the county clerk tells taxing subdivisions or entities like school districts by June 15th what their revenue neutral rates are. And then the board has to adopt a resolution of what you're going to do. And again, similar to in the past, 10 days in advance of your public hearing, you have to publish your notice of that on your website and in the official newspaper, which is in the legal things you approved tonight for the coming year, the Miami County Republic. And then on or before July 20th, we have to tell the county clerk what our intent is. And that's why this July board meeting is so important, because obviously we don't have another board meeting before July 20th. So the budget program you'll see later in my calendar, budget calendar, comes out usually late June by July 1st. So that turnaround time is really, really quick to get it ready for this meeting and to hopefully not have to have a special board meeting, which is always an option to meet that July 20th deadline. So if you tell the county clerk by July 20th, if you're exceeding revenue neutral, you have to have a public hearing, not sooner than August 20th, because you have to give time for the taxpayer notices to be mailed out, but not later than September 20th. So that's the window if you're exceeding revenue neutral, is August 20th to September 20th. And that's what we've been following here in the past. You can have the public hearing, the revenue neutral, and the budget adoption hearing all the same night. They're separate hearings, but they can be on the same date. Again, just like anything, it takes a majority vote to approve exceeding the revenue neutral rate. Any governing body that doesn't comply, you know, if you do something incorrect or whatnot, then you're getting the revenue neutral rate anyway. If you don't do all the proper notifications, then you can't exceed it if you haven't done all the steps that are required. Again, the public hearing dates, if you're exceeding again, you have to tell the county clerk by October 1st what your mill levy rates are and what dollars you're requesting. And so after the first 2 years, then the first 2 years we didn't have to pay anything when the taxpayer notices went out. But after those first 2 years, which would be this year and forward, the county clerk can seek reimbursement from anybody that's required to send out those notices. So again, this was something I shared before. It's the same as last year. The KSD put out when this was all new, that, you know, if you were exceeding revenue neutral, if you're not exceeding revenue neutral, you follow the old laws and rules for publication and hearing. And so then if you're not exceeding revenue neutral, you still have to have your budget done and certified to the county clerk and to the State Department of Ed by August the 25th. So different timelines depending on what a board is doing. And again, if you're exceeding that, you have to tell the county on or before July 20th. Either way, you have to let them know what you're doing. Again, as I mentioned, same thing. If you do it wrong or don't do it, then the default is you're going to get the same taxes a year before. You'd be revenue neutral. Rec commissions are computed separately from school districts. Our rec commission obviously flows through our budget. They have to do their own budget approval by their board. They have to have their own hearing. They have to do their own intent. They tell us what their mill levies are because I have to know that to put it in our budget. But they are separate even though they're included in ours. So it's always a good distinction. We don't have anything really to do with their budget and what they do. So again, this is just kind of a recap of that. The timelines, when that changed, was with the 21-22 school year. And it tightened the timeline, like I've already alluded to, because the program comes out late June. By July 1. We have to have those mill levy rates done and the budget far enough along to know before this meeting so you can know what you're going to do as far as revenue neutral or not. When it first happened, KSDE had said this was all for KSDE. Just with your normal increases in assessed valuation, the new process, meaning exceeding revenue neutral, they said was likely to apply to all USDs. And a lot of these other go through by site sources or the links will be up in the top. So again, same thing, the timeline. So started in 2022. When the taxpayer notices started, so again, that happened in 2022 and 2023. So this is the year that if you have to send that out, that you may have to pay a part of that cost. This is from the state of Kansas Department of Administration. So again, just kind of a recap, but same thing. If you are not exceeding revenue neutral, your budget is due August the 25th. If you remember back what our practice used to be, we had a special board meeting the 4th Monday in August. That was our budget, revenue neutral, and everything approval. Here's the August calendar in here just for reference. 4th Monday is August 26th. Well, typically when a deadline falls on a Sunday, just like your federal taxes, if April 15th falls on a Sunday, you have till the Monday. But questionable, because August 26th would be after. Well, we're not going to have to really entertain that as we go through this, as you'll see with the revenue neutral information that we're presenting. But again, if we were exceeding, we would have to adjust that and not do the 4th Monday in August to be technically correct and not leave any open to chance. So again, just a recap, the taxpayer notices. This is last year's notice from Miami County. That's the whole notice, what it looks like. And I'll go through just a few sections, just kind of a recap, refresher to remind everybody what these look like. Has your personal information in there. I show this residential because that's what the majority of our properties in our district are residential, so that's kind of what that looks like. It would say commercial, it would say agricultural, whatever class of property that you have. And then of course your data will be filled in. The middle section, again, schools. We are listed 3 different times on that notice. The first one is the local option budget and the bond and interest. The next one is capital outlay, even though the notice doesn't really spell it all the way out. And the last one is the general fund. And so that has to do with how our mill levies work, and ours all have the same assessed value with the exception of the general fund, and that's because of the exemption that we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's why schools are listed 3 times. And you can see the rec commissions up above, state, county, Paola, the city of Paola, and then the extension district. That was last year's notice.
again, this is that bottom section. If you exceed revenue neutral, it tells when your hearing date and time and location is so the public can attend. The state of Kansas doesn't have to have that hearing. It's part of the legislative process. So again, there's always says no hearing required. And if you don't exceed revenue neutral, it would say the same thing down here. This was a cover letter that went out with 2023's Miami County taxpayer notice. There's some good information in there just for reference. I put this in here because we have a piece of Franklin County as well, a little sliver. And so that notice goes to Franklin County taxpayers too. Their county clerk generates their taxpayer notice. And you'll see they're generally the same, but really each county can be a little bit different. And if you really dig into and study what's shown for the school, again, same thing, the assessed value class at the top. But if you dig into this, they break these down a little bit different in Franklin County than they do for Miami County. Miami County is, of course, the majority of our tax revenue, and that's the one we follow. But we just point that out that the Franklin County notices do look a little different in how they break down the mill levies, but that's the difference in counties. Again, same thing, if you're having a hearing or not, that's again last year. This is actually Franklin County's note from 2 years ago. I thought it had some good points in there about why would a taxing entity need to increase revenue, talked a little bit about inflation and things, and to provide residents the same or better service, it costs more. And so obviously, if you are revenue neutral, you're doing the same with the same money, even though your costs have probably gone up from the year over. But again, as we're going to go through tonight, this is a timeline for us to follow being revenue neutral. And we'll get into some of those details about how revenue neutral might be possible this year. So again, just to recap, some of the dates in orange are board meeting dates. We've already done these things. You've heard about the building needs assessment. This is tonight when we're going to approve the notice of revenue neutral intent, and then also approving the publication of the budget. Because just to cut to the end of the book, this presentation is all about being revenue neutral. So we know what those mill rates are going to be. So we'll go ahead and approve the budget publication tonight too, if you agree. And then we would have our budget hearing, as you see down here, at the August 12th board meeting. We won't need that fourth Monday in August special board meeting, which would have been on August 26th, and we couldn't have done anyway. So we have to have adjusted that if we felt we needed to exceed revenue neutral. So again, this is where we are tonight. Actually, tomorrow, Matt and I will be in Topeka to have the budget reviewed by the Kansas State Department of Education. They've already reviewed the preliminary mill rates in anticipation of this meeting, which is kind of our normal practice. This is actually all about 3 weeks earlier than normal, just because of the timeline and to get that to where we can do the budget approval at the August 12th board meeting and not have to have a special meeting for publication or anything else. So after we go to Topeka tomorrow, assuming that there are no changes that come out of that of significance, we'll send the preliminary code 99 to the paper by the end of the week. It would be in the newspaper on the Wednesday, July 17th edition, so the week following this week. And then we'll tell Janet White, the Miami County Clerk, after tonight's meeting of our intent. That'll meet the July 20th date. This won't apply to us, but after July 20th, they will notify taxpayers if anybody is exceeding revenue neutral. And then on Monday, August 12th, you can see it's just approving the budget. So with us not going to exceed revenue neutral, we don't have to have a revenue neutral hearing as we normally have those all the same night, that special fourth Monday in August. So we'll have it done August 12th. You have to approve that LOE resolution every year regardless. Our LOE's already been approved by voters, but you have to actually approve a resolution when you approve the budget, specifying the percentages and things, which again, we tell KSDE back in March what our maximum LOE percentage is. So again, August 25th is the due date for our budget based on being revenue neutral. We're all good so far on dates? We'll go a little faster. This is kind of a recap, same thing as before. If you log on, and again, the link is there, this will be on Board Docs tomorrow after you've all seen the presentation. We'll put this out there. Those hyperlinks will work, people can click them, but you can go to the treasurer's website, log in, and get this information on your property or any property actually. But so I always like this chart showing in there because there's been a lot of focus on property tax, and some information is factual and some is not. This is 37% of the tax bill is for USD368. Sometimes you hear of a lot larger numbers than that. That is the real number, so that's 37%. You'll see a little bit more of a breakdown there here in a minute. But that's the percentage. It's not 50%, it's not 70%, it's not 80%, it's 37%. And that's on a house, and that's 136 mills. So that's the school, the city, the county. Any city of Paola residents would be under that same mill rate. If you're not in the city limits, then you're not at 136 mills, because you're not paying city of Paola mills. You just be, if you're out in the county, you have your county mills. So, but by and large, a lot of our district territory covers the city of Paola, and residents is why I use that. But you can look that up for your own property. So again, this information is out there too. This is actually from the Kansas Department of Revenue. And so you can go out there and select by county, and you can get the breakdown. And so again, as I noted, this is for all Miami County schools, not just USD368. But again, general fund is listed there about 17%. All the other is about 30%. So again, that's the percentage that we're talking about. The rest of these things are not school. They're the other things as listed there. State, the county, the city, and then all down. Again, just a pie chart breakdown of that prior chart. This is not new. It's the same thing. There's a homeowner's guide to property taxes in Kansas that's linked up above. It talks about why property tax and what happens to taxes based on your appraised value. If your appraised value goes up or if your appraised value goes down. It talks about what may or may not change with your taxes. This is also a part of that, telling you how to calculate the taxes on your home. Now, as I put here at the top, this changed with the special legislative session. It used to be the first $40,000 of your house was exempt for general fund. That's now $75,000. That's part of the tax relief. They just, even as of this weekend, this was not updated on the website yet, but that is a change. Same math, just you wouldn't use 40,000, you'd use 75. Again, property tax, just a recap, your assessed percentage from that other depends on what type of property it is. The example shows the residential, because that's by and large what most people talk about. But it depends. If it's ag use, commercial property, whatever it is, there's different percentages for that. And of course, exempt property over the 0%. This one is updated based on the special legislative session. So this is how mill levies are computed document that KSDE keeps updated. And it does have the new $75,000 exemption. So that's out there, walks through a little more in depth and in detail how to calculate that differential and what that means for our residential property. Again, this just shows kind of the breakdown, more details you can get, and again, the link's there. And why I talk about residential properties, I mean, 73% of the properties in Miami County fall under residential. You know, just you can see how much we have in commercial, other things, but by and large, residential is the bulk of the taxable properties in Miami County. And that's why we typically show those as examples. So assessed value impacts. You've heard me say this every year, and I'll say it again every year. The assessed value, everyone thinks it's always means more money for like a school district. However, a lot of it depends on what happens with our students as well, and what happens with our assessed value relative to other districts. So they convert this, they take the assessed value per pupil and divide it by the number of students to come up with assessed value per pupil. And as that increases relative to the rest of the state, if we are more wealthy than the other school districts, we actually lose state aid. So yes, the assessed value might raise things up, we lose it on the other end for the state aid. And there's some links to the statute and things for every $1,000, the 1% change. I'll show you the end result of that. So state aid changes from last year to this year. On local option budget, we were getting 28.74% state aid. This year it's 23.89, so it's a 4.85% decrease. That's very comparable to last year's decrease. But I put on there just for reference, 2 years ago we were getting 33% state aid. So we're going from 33 to 23% in 2 years. So obviously 5% a year. We've now cumulatively lost just in the last 2 years 10% state aid. I'll show you the dollars next. Capital outlay, we were getting 9% state aid. Now it's going to be real easy to calculate. We are at 0. Same thing, bond and interest. Those two run together. We were getting 9%, now we're getting 0. So that's how the assessed value per pupil works, and the end result, the impact to us. What does that mean dollar-wise? We're losing $76,000 in state aid local option budget. We're losing all the capital outlay, $150,000. We're losing all the bond and interest state aid,
almost $195,000. So it's over a $421,000 decrease in 1 year, this budget year, of loss of state aid because of that relative wealth. Because our assessed value went up more than others. So we are more wealthy than the rest of the state. So we get less state aid. This is a shift to local taxpayers. But again, wait till the end of the book. The general fund increase, you've seen this before. What KSDE estimates based on the base state aid, that's from the state legislature putting in more money. So we're gonna get about $676,000 additional funds. Our local option budget is 33% of the general fund, so that's just a third added on top. Again, that's local tax with a little bit of state aid that's decreasing. So those two added together, that is our increased budget for next year, almost $900,000. But if you take off the $400,000 state aid, that's what I'm calling the net budget change. And then again, increasing costs, and I put their partial list, what we've already approved as a board for the negotiated agreement and staff raises, $618,000. The bus contract has a 3% annual increase, roughly $1 million+ spent on transportation, so it's about $37,000. And then for all other inflationary things, last year I used a 3% multiplier for inflation, or sorry, I used 4%. This year I lowered that down to 3. You know, kind of matches roughly what inflation hopefully is currently. Which on just LOE, that's $136,000. But again, just a reminder, property insurance, which we talked about last month, that alone went up $75,000. And then our work comp went up $10,000. So those two items alone, insurance was $85,000. So I don't think that's out of the realm of unreasonable a way to say what other costs are going to go up. So again, just that partial list, our increase in cost is $792,000. And again, the net, so we're actually budget going down. This is budget negative, if you will, because of that loss of state aid. If that wasn't there, $900,000 and $800,000 could be a positive. But again, that's the impact of the state aid decrease because of that assessed value per pupil relative wealth change. Again, there was a special legislative session this year that the legislature came back in session for 1 day and tackled tax relief. And Samantha probably do this part. I should hand her the clicker very slowly, but I won't put you on the spot. This is you know, the summary from the legislative session. And again, session's adjourned until January. This was the fiscal note on the tax package that was passed. And it's over 5 years. So there was income tax, Social Security tax, privilege taxes for banks, financial institutions, and then the residential property tax exemption going from that $40,000 to $75,000. And then a child tax credit. So this was the fiscal note over 5 years, put out by the legislature and legislative staff. So this is the Jimmy summary. So I just totaled that up in my own spreadsheet because instead of seeing it by year, I wanted to see the total. So again, it's about a $2 billion package. And I was curious on the percentage of things because property tax is a big focus and a big discussion. So how much of that tax relief, where did it go? 52% of it went to income tax relief. That's the changes in the brackets. Another 32% because Social Security is now exempt from state income tax. So 85% was income tax relief. And then you have the little bank financial institution and the child tax credit. So you net all those out, the property tax relief, what homeowners receive with that $75,000 was $236 million or 11% of the whole package. Now again, that's over 5 years. So anyway, I thought that was important to note as there's the continued emphasis on property taxes. But with us being revenue neutral, and actually you'll see later we're what I'm going to call revenue negative, that's going to provide some relief. The state did a part too, and that's going to provide some relief for residents or for residential property.
$80 per property.
$80,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's savings.
Yeah. So if you go back to that spreadsheet, that chart that tells you how to calculate it, and figure instead of 75,000, 40,000, just do the math, 35,000, it does, it figures out to about $80 a property. Yeah. So not huge, but it's going to help in addition to the budget that we're proposing tonight. Would help out our local taxpayers as well. So good to know what the state's doing in relative to what the school board is going to do. So again, Miami County, as I told in that chart, Jan White, the county clerk, gives us our revenue neutral rates. This is the whole document. This is the middle section of that. That's why it's number 3. It's just an excerpt. The current levies, and then the revenue neutral rates. General fund, capital outlay, and then all other. So all other is anything else you levy. For us, it is just bond and interest and local option budget. So those are the three. You actually have to add them up to come up with your total. And so the revenue neutral total of those three added together is 48.788. Just the all other funds and capital outlay, those two added together is 28.236. Just a note on general fund, the state law is you will levy 20 mils. So you can't levy 20.5 mils even if you wanted to. You can't levy 19.5, we will levy 20 mils. But again, that plays into the whole overall. But those are the published revenue neutral rates provided by the county. So this is the revenue neutral tax rate section of the Code 99, which is the notice of budget hearing. And this is information that we plug in from the county. So it has actual taxes levied for general fund, which again used to come to us, now it flows straight to the state. But that's the general fund taxes levied, and then all the other taxes, what we levied for LOB, capital outlay, bond and interest, and the total. So you have to add those two together for the total tax, $11+ million, which matches the Code 1. If you go back and look at your budget book last year, that shows the total. So the actual tax rates are listed in this column. Again, general fund plus that, so our mill rate was 49.546. You have to add the two together. The revenue neutral rate for general fund, and the reason it's above is because of that additional exemption. So it's almost like the opposite of revenue neutral. To keep revenue neutral with a higher exemption, the levy actually has to go up, which it won't. It will stay 20 mils, as you can see here, but that's where that state general fund will go down by that amount on that prior slide, showing the total of 5 years. Because no school district will levy more than 20 mils, that's the law. But that's the way the calculation works. And the county tells us the all other funds, which again is a lump sum, and then the mix we can break down in here. So as you look through this, you'll see that our LOB is going up, and again, that's operational dollars. Last year, capital outlay, we kept that fund, even though our budget overall was not revenue neutral, we kept capital outlay revenue neutral, and we'll talk again, a little recap about how that was possible. This proposed budget has that capital outlay back at 8 mils, and I'll tell you some of how we were able to do 6.88 last year. And then bond and interest, there are several slides in here that we'll talk more in depth about how we're able to lower that mill levy down. You can see it's going to drop from 9.8 to 5.69. And so even though these are going up, bond and interest is going down, the overall is decreasing from last year, and it is also under the revenue neutral rate. So you have to meet it under the mill levy rate, and you have to also be under the dollars. And you can see that we are on both. That's why this is considered revenue neutral. The final mill levy rates, always subject to change. That's on the notice because of final assessment and value changes and appeals and whatever else could happen at the county level. So the reason I say it's pending is we won't know really what that is until later. But no plan changes between now and the August 12th board meeting, subject to the board's input. So again, this is the mill levy rate. The county rate, just a little different way of looking at it, same information. Our preliminary and what the final will be, which again, we'll have the actual. I don't expect much change from this after we go to KSDE tomorrow and make sure everything checks out there. They've already, like I said, reviewed the preliminary. But again, the taxes were 11.6 million total. This would be 11.3 million total. So we are 0.82 mils below the revenue neutral requirement and almost $250,000 below the revenue neutral dollar threshold. So again, we've sent this to Janet White to make sure, because the county clerk is the one that really has to certify that you're revenue neutral or not. She has concurred, KSDE has reviewed it, we'll do the final in-depth sitting down with them tomorrow as well, which is what we do before the August board meeting always. It's just the timeline's moved up a lot this year. Okay, so a closer look. Any questions first?
I have one question. So if we move it up to 8 mil and raise the mills and other ones, based on the fact that the bonds are actually depreciating and we're paying less on those, will it, my guess it's gonna impact next year's budget to where we won't be able to stay revenue neutral based on how it's looking right now?
Well, actually, when we get to a slide, I think, because we will pay the bonds off, and we'll go through this in depth, but the bonds will pay off in this budget year that we're in now. But probably not until May or June, which is the last year of the fiscal year. And so next year's budget, we're 5 whatever mils, should be 0. So I think, sitting here today, now there's a lot of things that could change. A lot of variables, and that's what's so hard to predict. But if everything stayed the same, and there weren't major changes of anything, I think we can be revenue neutral again next year.
Okay, so it's not impossible.
No, and I'll show you that on a coming slide. Because those 5 mils now are going to go away. You know, we went from 9.8 to the 5 point whatever, and then once they're paid off, it will be 0. And so I think, again, those 5 mils, we could leave capital outlay at 8 like it is, and it gives us an opportunity, and there's gonna be some other mills that I'm gonna talk about in here that I've mentioned to the board in the past, that we could take advantage of to increase our operating money and also backfill the capital side of things. Because obviously with the bond failed, so we don't have bond money coming in to do the things we're going to do. The new projects just won't happen. We still have to maintain our buildings. So that's why, in my opinion, it's important to raise that capital outlay back up, because that is our only source of revenue now to maintain buildings, unless we want to hit the general fund, which again, in my opinion, that should be for education. And you'll see later, I'm preempting all my slides, right? Questions about it. I have a slide in here that says levies are for learning, bonds are for buildings. So your mill levy should be to educate students. The bond money is for buildings, but we're not gonna have a bond anymore. We still have to maintain what we have, and that's gotta come out of capital outlay. If we didn't have enough capital outlay, and the rooftop quits working, or the roof leaks, I don't think we're gonna not fix that. It would have to come out of general fund, and that's the educational side of the budget. So I think there's a great opportunity with the bonds paying off to be able to shift to the operating side of things where we need, or capital outlay, and still give taxpayer relief. So again, revenue neutral this year. Can't overpromise already for next year, but I really think this is gonna be revenue neutral for 2 years. Which, if I'm not mistaken, there's nobody in the county that has done that. Maybe smaller, you get the lights in the cemetery and some of those. I'm talking about the major players, the city, the county, the school districts. I don't know that a school district has been revenue neutral yet in the county. The city has not. The county was for 1 year only. And again, my philosophy on mill levies, it's consistency is good. I prefer not to have yo-yos of things. And so I really do think we can do this 2 years in a row. And at the same time, look at some of those other things that I want to talk about, cost of living, adult ed, that can help us on the operating side, since we don't have the bond money coming in, because we do have to maintain and keep up the facilities that we do have. Other questions? Now, I already covered like 10 slides. So. And looking right there, levies are for learning, bonds are for building. So I stole that, I didn't come up with that, but I think that's a good reminder of how things should look. You wouldn't want to have to take general fund money and pay for a rooftop, but you gotta fix those things. So if you don't have the capital outlay funds to do it, that's where it comes from. But that should be for learning, for educating students. So again, what we levy now is what I've already gone through. The Rec Commission also levies 1.24 mils, which flows through us. They will have their same process and things, but you can see in the budget, not to preempt their story, but you can figure out from our budget what their plan is as far as their revenue neutral status by looking at the mill levies in our budget. So again, these are just the authorizations for those. We had voter approval on a local option budget. That was a ballot question. The capital outlay was also voter approved back in 2014. Bond and interest, the last bond passed was 2014. Again, they're going to pay off to do something else. We'd have to go back to the voters for the authorization for that. And then the Rec Commission had voter approval in 2021. We don't levy these things. This is kind of what I alluded to. We don't levy anything for adult education. We do have an adult education program that we maintain the building out there on Industrial Park, so that we could levy a little bit of a mill to offset some of those costs, which then would in turn free up the general fund money that we do put into the building as needed. We were part of a consortium with Paola, Osawatomie, and Ottawa, and much like the co-op, we hosted that. Ottawa had a mill levy back when they were part of our consortium. They're on their own now. I don't know if they still levy or not, but they had an adult ed mill levy. Cost of living, I've talked to the board in the past about that. That has to do with the cost of housing in our district. And as as we know and we see by that assessed value, you can know that relative to the rest of the state, it's expensive to live in this area because of the value of the houses. And so that, based on the high cost of houses and the average value of a home compared to the rest of the state, if you're in a high cost area, you can levy cost of living. And I'll show you some numbers on that. It's a significant amount of money. Now, we wouldn't necessarily want to do all of that because that is 100% local tax, as is adult ed. There's no state aid on this. So again, we want to be aware of our local taxpayers, but I think we can still give tax relief and get the dollars where we need them to operate, without a bond until at whatever point a future board may decide to run a bond issue or something else for building wise. School districts cannot levy sales tax. So again, as inflation goes up and products cost more and you're spending more at the store, entities that get sales tax are getting more sales tax because the cost of goods is going up and the percent stay the same, so it's a higher base. We don't get anything. Now the state of Kansas does, so in a trickle down effect, that all goes in the state general fund, but schools cannot levy a sales tax. The rec commission statute, they can go up to 4 mills, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later, but they have 2 funds basically right now. They're regular 1 mill basically, and then their employee benefits fund, which was new this last budget year. So again, in the 25-26 budget year, we could utilize some of these things. I didn't talk about special assessment. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but we did that in the past when it was like the sidewalks and things, and we levied a small amount there. Still have a little bit of money there that could be paid for something like that, but those are other things, and I'll show you the code one in a minute. But I think we could still, because that bond mill will go to 0, as I just said earlier, we could take advantage of some of those to get additional operating dollars and still be revenue neutral, or probably revenue negative like this year. We're revenue neutral, but as you saw, this revenue negative is what I'm going to call it, because we're taxing less, not the same, less. Revenue neutral is your dollar for dollar the same. We're below that threshold. So again, cost of living, this is the same information here. I did update the bottom. This was last year's information at the time. The final ended up, instead of being 1.46% of your general fund, ended up being 3.25%. Or I'm sorry, I take that back. It was 2.41. That's our percent for this year, 3.25%. Again, we're not proposing to levy that, but we could. And if we levied 3.25% of our general fund, that's $511,000. Again, significant dollars for operating. Again, it's 100% local property tax. We probably would never do that total amount. But again, that's something that I want to have more conversation throughout the next year, because if the board wants this as an option, there's some steps that we have to do. We can't just do this at this time next year. There's some resolutions and things you have to do leading up to be even eligible to consider, much like LOE and things that we had to do in the past. So more to come on that, as I think that's something that we need to keep on the table. Again, that cost of living is based on the cost of homes. This was something, again, the link is there. This is the same thing I noted, 20 through 24, anything that's not updated. So I couldn't find this data for this year. If you find that link, it's not been updated. But you can see Miami County was the 4th highest. This is in the state by median home value. Johnson County was 1st, Douglas County, Leavenworth, and then Miami County. And again, that's how we ended up qualifying, because we're a big part of that number right there, just because of where we're at. This is information that's publicly available out on the county appraiser's website. I just put it in there for information. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but you can look and see kind of those, again, average home price in Paola, average sale price, median sale price, relative to others in our county, and get an idea how that happens and the value differences. This is an interesting chart here showing the percent change of properties. So the bulk of properties had a 1 to 3% change. Then 23% of them were in 3 to 5. Some had reductions, some were 9% above, so just a breakdown there. But again, all the links there. This is the code 1. So I highlighted this in yellow. Yellow is what we levy, and again, the levies have the dollars in there. The green are the ones that we don't levy that I mentioned that we do. Again, we spend money on adult ed. We don't levy anything additional for that. There's an adult ed grant that funds a lot of that. But again, that could be a way to backfill some dollars in. Cost of living, we talked about that. We're not levying it this year. If we want to, we'll need to do some resolutions and planning for that if we want that as an option in the future. Again, I think that could be an option to, again, keep some of that for operating that we need, because as you'll see, especially in August when I walk through the budget, what the operating budget looks like. and you saw that summary earlier, if you take the state aid out, it's negative. So again, that could be a good option for us to look at those two. Bond and interest, we will levy this year, that's why it's in yellow, and then this is the last year it will pay off. Everything works the way it should, and it will. It will pay off, and that will be zero. The special assessment, I mentioned we have a little money left there. You could do things there. There's also other things I haven't talked about that I don't think I even highlighted, like special assessment or a special liability fund that some districts levy to pay for their property insurance as well. So a lot of levers that we could consider. The second page part of that, the bottom section of that, is where it lists everything else. The rec commission I had in yellow, they have their 2 levies there, and the dollar amount there. So this budget code 1 is what, after you approve, Michelle and I will sign this. This is what will go in the news. This actually doesn't go in the newspaper. The code 99 does. So comparative data, again, you can go, I didn't put the link up there because I just did this over the weekend, but I can give you the link. It's comparative data reports on KSDE. I just chopped the headings off, but this tells you last year's budget, because again, everybody's in the process this year, so you won't see that for a while. But this is what the state averages were for all the different levy funds. General fund, obviously, everybody's 20 mils. So you can see where we compare. Supplemental general is the LOB. The average adult ed is 0.43 mils. Capital outlay is 7.3. Cost of living, 2 mils. The special liability, that's when I mentioned you can pay your insurance premiums out of. Extraordinary growth, we wouldn't qualify for that. That's rapidly growing districts like Spring Hill and others levy that. Bond and interest, 1 and 2, it's the same thing. You have one or the other depending on the timing of it, but you can see they're comparable. Special assessment, again, is what we've levied in the past to pay for things the city assessed us for: sidewalks, trails, historical museums, public libraries. We don't have any of that. Those would be flow through things like the rec commission. In rec commission, 2.8 mils and 0.8 mils is the state average. The state average, if you add all those up, is 51.9 mils. The lowest mill levy in the state is Fort Leavenworth. They're very unique because it's mostly federal property. There's like 3 properties that I think are taxed there, commercial properties. But the one right above that was like 27 mils. A lot of those are smaller districts. The highest mill levy in the state, Quinter, which is a little district, but there's several districts in the 70s, but that's the range, 25 to 75, and the state average. Our rank, if you rank from high to low, out of 286 districts, we are down number 172. So we're about 60th percentile, if I've said that not the opposite way. So 171 districts levy more than us, and if I'm doing my math good on the fly, 114, I think, are lower than us. So that's where we fall in the rank. Again, you can see the whole list if you go to comparative reports. I'm going to breeze through these, but I put just some general information in there. In the August, I will go through all the funds in depth, so please forgive me now and make sure you come back in August.
Bring your popcorn.
Yeah, or peanut M&Ms. I like those too.
I might be able to.
So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, just some general information, the basics of school financing. We'll go into this in much more detail in August, all the individual funds and levies. But again, the highlights that I've already talked about that. The general fund history in there, again, it's 20 mils, but years ago, that was more, and the legislature changed that. I mean, it had been 35 mils. The history's out there of that. I just keep that in there just for reference. Again, if your general fund is the only reason you exceed revenue neutral, then you're not considered to be exceeding revenue neutral. We're not exceeding it in any funds. LOB, again, you can levy up to the state average or up to 33%. That was our voter approval up to 33. The state average is 32, so there's not a lot of difference in there. Funding is from local property tax and equalized state aid. Again, state aid is dropping, as I've shown. If there's a cash balance carryover, which there is, that helps your next year mill rate. And the LOB is calculated at a higher base state aid compared to the general fund. That's a lot of details now. Capital outlay, again, up to 8 mils, what you can spend it on. The revenue is not for operating expenses. You can't pay salaries out of that. It's building related things. And why schools normally accumulate some cash in there. That's the actual statute. That's our resolution back when we passed it. So again, last year we were revenue neutral in that. A big part of that was we got a KDHE grant, $634,000 that we used for HVAC that would have been paid out of capital outlay. again, that's a one-time thing, but that helped us out last year. That's how that fund was able to be revenue neutral in large part. We also got capital outlay state aid last year, and like I said, that's gonna be $0 going forward. It's gonna be really easy to calculate, sadly. So although it decreased last year, we still qualified. So we got that $150,000, but that's it, we're done. Part of that decrease too, a good side benefit of higher interest rates, the money we had on deposits, we earned $156,000 more in interest than we did the year before. And that we credit into the capital outlay fund. So the balances that we have, some of them go back to the funds, like special ed, the co-op has to go to them, food service goes to them, but district general money goes to capital outlay. So that's huge. But again, is that going to continue? No. Soon rates are gonna come back down, and then, but that helped offset that. And will help until the rates come back down to the rates they used to be. Again, we went over capital outlay earlier this year, for this coming school year. These were the projects that we didn't fund, that we had requests for, and if you remember, we didn't do, a lot of the big things we didn't do were parking lot things. We did 0 parking lot work. We've done a little bit of concrete, but no asphalt work. Long term, we're gonna have to do some things there. But again, there was about $699,000 of things we didn't fund. Part of that, we were the 6.88 mils. Going to 8 mils gets us a little more to do some of those things that we may not have to postpone further. Bond and interest, and I promise we're getting on the downhill slide. Again, the revenue is generated from the local mill levy. It pays your principal and interest. There's no state aid this year and beyond. Our bond, the stated maturity dates are 2028. But because of tax collection and conservative assumptions in there, we're going to be able to pay those off early. So this is the actual aggregate debt service that I use the budget. You can see down there it goes out to 2028. This lists each bond series that's outstanding, the amount of principal, the interest, all the things there, but I just wanted to show what that date could have been. Now these last two we get down, they're smaller principal amounts, and typically that's when you would have layered in another bond. That's not an option for us at this point in time. So this is the amortization schedule or the payoff schedule. In the budget program that you'll see in depth in August, this is the code 5, bond and interest. It's the same thing, just laid out a little differently. These color-coded cells are gonna go over to code 62, I'll show you next. But these are what we're gonna pay off in this fiscal year. That's what we normally would pay. Then there's an 18-month component. This is the rest. Normal, if we weren't paying off, we'd only pay $2 million. But we're gonna be able to pay all the bonds off, which is the 6.3 million roughly change. You'll see that more here in just a minute. So again, this is the condensed version of this. I've deleted a lot of lines that don't pertain. Those color-coded cells carried over. But you can see resources available, it starts out with the cash balance, plus the tax revenue, less the payments, the ending balance carries over to the next column. And then the 18-month financing are those early payoffs and things. You always do 18 months whether we're paying off or not. This year, that just will happen to pay everything off in this fiscal year. This is just something that I've kept. I show it because this paying off, there's a cash basis reserve figure in here that plays into all the calculation, how it backs into the amount of tax to be levied. So this is the history of what our cash basis reserve has been, what our mill levy has been, the amount of tax that we've levied just for bond and interest, and the state aid. You see, we were getting 32%, 30% of state aid. You can see the drop, and down to 0 again this year. So, and you can see our expenditures. They were pretty consistent because of how our bonds were structured. This, again, is paying everything off. So had we not prepaid or planned to prepay, that would have been that $2 million number that I showed you earlier that's on the aggregate debt service map as well. But again, planning to pay those off when our cash balance is sufficient. So we started out about $5.8 million. That's a known number. That's the estimated revenue. The expenses, again, the regular plus the early payoff, should leave an ending balance. Now, the bond and interest fund will continue to get tax revenue for many years to come. Even after we levy 0 mils next year, there's still going to be money trickle in because of delinquency, much like the special assessment. We haven't levied that for many, many years. Last year, we got $2 whopping of revenue in that. It's somebody paid tax from years ago. So it will trickle in forever. So we'll still have this fund in the budget for a while. We just won't have a levy. And if there's any balance left over, it goes either towards future bond, it's kind of like LOB, you know, it rolls forward. Or if there is no immediate plan for a bond, then that can be used for capital outlay needs of buildings. So again, the mill levy should decrease, and it will decrease to 0 in 25-26. But we really won't pay it off till we get that May/June tax distribution. So it'll be probably in the last month of this fiscal year. So again, that's why it's dropping down. We'll pay off this year, it'll be 0 next year. Tax collections, this is the question I asked the county. You know, the open page, and again, we'll go through a lot of these things. In addition to property tax, the motor vehicle tax, this I felt like was a significant change just to point out. The county gives us those estimates. So this is last year's budget. The motor vehicle tax was $793,000. This year, it's $595,000. That's $200,000 less. It's been very consistent. I have a whole chart going back about 13 years. There's been some ebbs and flow, but pretty consistent. That's a 25% reduction in motor vehicle tax. And I've learned a lot that the county treasurer has shared about how that's calculated at the state. It's nothing I've dug into in the past, but I've dug into it more because I questioned that big of a drop. So hopefully when we all get our motor vehicle tax, we'll see our share of that $200,000 decrease. So it appears to be correct, as much as it didn't make sense to me initially. And I'll share more later on that, perhaps. Again, Board of Education goals, I put that in there just there on the wall back here, but the budget, the facilities, that's what we're talking about now. How we're funding education, how we're funding maintaining our buildings and property. Again, building needs assessment, we'll go through some more of that in detail again, but this is just to put in there, we talked about it in May, that's documented in the minutes, so that we've met the legal requirements of discussing that, we've been informed of that for Tammy's presentation of the buildings. So again, this is just a recap of that same slide, so that you can, we can pull that back up when you're ready to vote on things, but again, the neutral rates, the preliminary, which again, I don't anticipate much change of that, but that's a pending because that'll be in August. And really that doesn't change usually till next year. If this is our final, that could end up 10 or so mills because of final assessed value changes, appeals, whatnot can change, but you know, it's relatively stable. Again, we are below on the mills and we are below on the tax. So that's why this is a revenue neutral budget, or as I'm calling it, revenue negative, because revenue neutral would be the same. We're actually $243,000+ less. So again, that should help out our local taxpayers. Again, depending on what happens with their property. If your assessed value goes up, that could be, you know, affect your taxes. If your assessed value went down, the same thing. That's that other Department of Revenue slide back there. So again, but our budget is revenue negative, less than last year. So this is the document that actually we approved tonight to send back to Janet White, the Miami County Clerk. And if we were going to exceed revenue neutral, we would have to tell her the mill levy maximums and when our hearing is going to be. Assuming if you agree with everything I presented tonight, we will be doing this option that says no, we do not plan to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and we will submit our budget to the county clerk on or before August the 25th. Hence why we're going to approve this at the August board meeting, not the fourth Monday in August, which would be August 26th, which probably would be okay, but we're not going to even leave anything to chance. And so with your approval, once you approve and validate, I will sign and send this back to Janet White. This is the Code 99, and that is what will go in the newspaper. It shows the prior 2 years of the current year budgeted, and again, the tax mills are at the bottom of that. That's the second page with the rec commission and the assessed value information. The bond and interest outstanding debt, you can see how it's falling, and this again matches up to what I showed you earlier. We're going to pay off $6,355,000 next May/June. So again, the timeline, I've already covered that, but that's just a recap of what we'll do tonight. And then again, on August the 12th, we do not have to have a revenue neutral hearing because we are not exceeding revenue neutral. So we will just have a budget approval in August. And then that will be done August 12th. We will be plenty of time ahead of the August 25th deadline. Questions? That's a lot. So, as you know, I've told you, I'm always available for questions, and my contact information is there. My budget review next month, which is the 15-page condensed summary, I promise you, it really is condensed. That will be, all the documents will be on the website along with my contact information. I encourage anyone with questions to reach out to me by phone or by email. I love talking school finance. I'd be
slide back up if that, I thought this might be helpful as you talk about, and this is the action item there, but.
I will say thank you for working a way to keep it revenue neutral.
Agreed.
That is really important, especially with the inflation that a lot of people are seeing right now.
I think it's good timing. I mean, with the bonds paying off and things, and paying off early, because if they would've gone to 2028, we wouldn't be able to do this. But, you know, our bond consultant is always conservative. You never wanna come up short and miss a bond payment. Don't think anybody's done that in the history of the state. We're certainly never gonna be the first. So that's how we always overcollect. Even the budgets, based on a 4% delinquency, our tax collection rate's much higher than that. But again, you don't ever want your budget to be underfunded. So it is good timing, because if that wasn't until 2028, I'm not sure we could do that this year. And so that and what the state's done is gonna help us, is on top of what you all as a school board are doing, so.
The portion that we're not getting from the state, does that come from a mill levy statewide, or where does that money specifically come from? I guess, because I'm trying to,
Are
the
you
money that we're
saying-
not getting because of our appraisals being so high.
Oh, and like the loss of state aid. So really, that's what I call a local tax shift. So of course, our budget is federal money, it's state money, and it's local money. That's the three broad categories. So the federal money is pretty consistent, there's nothing more coming in, so the less is coming from the state. So that 400,000 is coming local. And that's what's happened over the past, and I'll show you in August the chart. It's really interesting when you look linear over the last several years. I mean, you don't have to go back very many years, it's more than $1 million shift from state to local. And so again, to be revenue neutral, same dollars as you were, but getting less from the state, you have to get more local, or that's not neutral. Well, we're absorbing some of that, as you see here, why this budget is what I'm referring to as revenue negative, even though the correct term by this is revenue neutral, anything less than that. But it is a shift, so local taxpayers pay that in the real estate tax, the motor vehicle tax. That's just kind of how that works with the state aid formula.
Okay.
That as your relative wealth goes up, they're saying your local taxpayers are more wealthy and the state pays less and you make up the difference.
Okay.
So, and you'll see that a little more, like our general fund, if I flip back to that, I think it's too many slides back, but like the code 1 will show the local tax was like $4 million, I think, going from memory for our general fund. Our general fund is like 14 or 15 million, again, that's authority, and we're always a lot less than that, and I'll show you that in August, in the published budget versus the final. But by and large, for argument's sake, if you said the general fund was 15 million, and we're getting 4 million from the state, the 11 million is the local and the federal piece.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I'm thinking more legislatively how to clean that part up, so.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that happened on that front?
Jimmy, am I correct that revenue neutral doesn't take into account loss of state aid, which is what can really cause districts an issue with revenue neutral? Because you're losing the money, but you don't get the credit for it being
Right.
revenue neutral.
I reached out to legislative research on that, and they are not 100% positive that's actually correct. So that's what we need to clean up, to make sure that that's done. It's not hurting school districts, is what I'm trying to fix, so.
Yeah. But again, those are the three components, so when one federal, state, local, one goes up and the other goes down, it's either got to offset or the whole thing goes down, which I feel like this budget that was in here, it's kind of the best of all those worlds. It's getting us more operating funds, which we need, because we're not gonna have a bond to do all those things for buildings. It's gonna have to come out of capital outlay. But yet we're able to do that, maximize what we need to educate students, to take care of facilities, to take care of our staff, and also still give some relief to taxpayers. So I think that's a win-win-win.
Good work.
So thank you all for.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Any other questions? I apologize about the boring nature of it, but it's very important, but it is dry. I will agree with that. And in August, I'll go through all of it in much more depth, but again, I think this is a good, responsible budget, tax money, so maybe that will help local taxpayers.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, next we do have one open forum. according to Kansas law, KSA 75-4319, the board shall not hear personnel complaints concerning any employee or group of employees, the school district, or any person connected with the school district during open session. Matters relating to the security of the board, the school buildings or facilities, or the information system of the school. Other topics defined as part of KSA 75-4319. You will have 5 minutes to speak, and we'll ask that you come up to the podium and introduce yourself, and tell us your address. Is that correct? Okay, so Carol, would you like to come on up? And you will have a timer up there just to, to kind of help you keep track of things. So thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my name is Carol Williams. My address 28924 Chinkapin Lane, and that is in Paola. And what I want to talk about is the Ten Commandments. We probably all have heard that Louisiana is going to put them in every schoolroom, and I'm not necessarily trying to get that, but though I will say that the Ten Commandments are of Judeo-Christian origin, but they're also an important part of our founding and history here in America. And so having them in the classroom would be good for historical information as children see them. Also, the Ten Commandments were a part of public education from the time of the Pilgrims until 1980, when there was an unfortunate decision made at the Supreme Court. But the thing that makes me hope that you will think about at least allowing having the Ten Commandments in the schoolroom comes from something I heard just last week. In 1946, there was a judge in St. Cloud, Minnesota, who heard a case involving a troubled young teenage boy who had stolen a car and hit somebody. And he decided that rather than a stiff sentence, that the young man might be better served by learning the Ten Commandments. Whereupon the young man said, "What are the Ten Commandments?" So the judge found someone to teach the young man the Ten Commandments, but what he was to do was to memorize them. Anyway, later on, the young man came back to the judge and he thanked him for doing that it had made a change in his life and turned his life completely around. So then the judge also made copies of the Ten Commandments, and he sent them to district, juvenile, and municipal courts, some churches and schools, and civic and fraternal organizations. And he was a member of the Eagles, I believe. Yes, Fraternal Order of Eagles. And they essentially, he got them involved, and they sent out tens of thousands of copies of the Ten Commandments and sent to schools all over the country. And for you all, the thing is, if we teach children to respect their parents, to honor their parents, then maybe they will respect their teachers more. If you say you shouldn't murder people, then hopefully school shootings would decrease. Thou shalt not lie. Well, that's kind of like deceiving. So maybe you wouldn't cheat on tests when you're in school. Anyway, I think that there are good things that children could learn from seeing those. Even if they skip the first 4, those last 6 are really good things for making better citizens. And we all want better citizens. We all want our children to be safe in school. And so that's my blurb.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're to action items. Approved notice of revenue neutral rate intent, which is myself and Jimmy, I guess.
and that's basically just that document that I had up, the form that we'll send back to the county clerk that we approve as presented. It's the box that's checked that says, no, we do not plan to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and we'll submit our budget to the county clerk on or before August the 25th. And that copy is in Board Docs. We'll upload the signed version tomorrow.
I move we approve the notice. Jimmy?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the notice of revenue neutral rate intent? Next, we need to, approve 2024-2025 budget publications. Again, Jimmy and myself.
Yeah, and again, this is the actual, the code 1 and the code 99 that I showed you, those excerpts. And after you approve, Michelle, before we leave tonight, I'll get your signature on those. And again, Matt and I are taking the budget to Topeka tomorrow for the final review. They've reviewed the preliminary, so assuming no major changes there, if there was something, we'd certainly let you know, but not anticipating any, hopefully any at all. I'd like them to say, looks great, let's publish.
I motion to approve the 24-25 budget publication.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the budget publication. All those in favor? Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, next up is, adopt KASB policy updates, BBG, delete, BCBK and BCBK form, CJCLEBBG, adopt a new one, ID, IF, JBE, earning table, JGFGA, JH, and J, and KK, excuse me, sorry, Matt.
Can I make a substitute motion to remove the IF? We'll change IF. And vote on that separately.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so, I mean, what you can do, I mean, depends on, I mean, if you wanna approve them minus that, I mean, that's obviously what you can do. What I would tell you is that there, from what we put in last month, I mean, just all the stuff, there's obviously 4 policies that had changes because of the Title IX regulations. There has been an injunction to the state of Kansas on the Title IX, and so obviously all of those have been taken out. I say that's tabled, that's just put off. We'll let the process to see if that needs to come back in some form or to have more discussion. So the policies, the way the policies work, twice a year, KSB, since we contract with them, they go through policies in December and then in June, and then for consideration and so forth. I try to go through them. Sometimes there's some that are because of statute changes or cleanup, and others, you know, they're making a recommendation to try to be more precise or what have you. So obviously we have, most of them, we have these policies. The difference on this one would be the JBE EBBG, that would be a new policy that we currently don't have. It would be deleting one. So, and I don't remember that IF, Samantha, which one is? Okay, yeah.
48, right?
So on that, it says, it talks about the review committee. Who is the review committee?
The review committee is made up of what is listed in here, who the makeup is by.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's,
Oh, I see it, the building principal.
Yes, it would have staff members, pending staff members, potential student, depending on the content, building administrator, and so forth. if you wanna make a motion to approve minus the one, I mean, that's obviously, within your realm.
Yeah, I'll motion to approve minus IF.
There's been a motion. Is there a second to approve the KASB policy updates minus IF?
Before we do, can you kind of
I was gonna say,
elaborate?
can we-
Like,
Yeah.
like, to see what you're
It-
seeing that I'm not.
Okay, it just seems a little bit more bureaucratic than necessary, and it seems like it'd be ideal for a larger district, but I don't feel like it's an update that we necessarily would need for our district being a smaller one. I mean, unless I'm wrong and there's a lot of objections that come in and there's more than a year or less than a year in between. Has that happened before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's,
Yeah,
It
and
just seems
honestly,
like
I
an
think that's
unnecessary
probably
update to me.
the biggest difference between the two. It cleans up maybe some wording, some conciseness, if you will. I think what this would do is if there was a challenge, and the result, somebody didn't like it, then the next month would be a challenge, and so that would be
but the
I
board
mean,
at
that
the
would
same
be the
time.
difference, but we have
Yeah.
not had that.
Okay, yeah, that's basically, just seems like an unnecessary update to me, but. It's not usually the way you're not gonna offend me if you don't, so.
We just have a motion,
Just need a motion, so you
Yeah.
need a second.
so if we can either have a second, and if not, then,
A second.
okay. There's been a motion and a second to adopt the policy updates minus IF. And all those in favor, please raise your hand. Do you have anything else on that?
No.
Okay, and then,
Motion for adjournment.
okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Okay, thank you. There's been a motion and a second, and all those in favor?